So I sent 10 songs through, and they was all finna be on my album because I didn't want nobody to steal my shit because I know how people move. So, boom. The one they took a liking to was the intro. Now the intro still dropped. I said, no, you can't have this song. He wanted me on his album still. He said, I'm gonna send you a verse through. Never sent a verse. I didn't give a fuck till I just went and listened to Iceman, and I listened to Little Birdie, and then I went back and listened to the intro of my first album. Twin. That's the only beat I've ever produced and sat there and produced. Don't rip my shit and repitch it like that, fam. That's fried. That's fried out and fucked up.
Drake stole 1900Rugrat song. Took the beat this man produced himself, the one track he told Drake's camp they could not have, and put it on a major album release like nobody was gonna notice. And now that 1900Rugrat has come out and said it publicly, Drake has to respond. Y'all need to understand something before we go any further. This ain't a regular industry dispute. This ain't two rappers arguing over producer credits or a publishing split. This is a 21-year-old kid from Limestone Creek, Florida, a town with barely over 1,000 people in it who finally broke through, finally got his shot, finally had the biggest artist in the game co-sign him, then turned around and watched that same artist allegedly reach back into his bag. Take the one song he specifically said no to, repitch the beat, and slide it onto Iceman like nothing happened. And here's what makes this story bigger than just Drake and 1900Rugrat. This man has done this before. He has a documented, receipted, undeniable pattern of taking from smaller artists their flows, their sounds, their actual written bars, and wearing it as his own. XXXTentacion said it. Meek Mill proved it. The Weeknd admitted it. Future's reference tracks leaked. Lil Yachty got brought up. And now on the very album Drake dropped to supposedly reclaim his legacy after getting demolished by Kendrick Lamar. One of the first things out of the gate is a rising Florida artist hopping on Instagram and saying, "That's my shot." Let me break it down for y'all from the very beginning. Before we get into what Drake allegedly did, you need to know exactly who this man is, because if you sleep on 1900Rugrat's story, you ain't gonna understand why this situation hits so different. Miles Spiel, born August 8, 2003, from Limestone Creek, Florida, a tiny enclave in Palm Beach County. Population? Just over 1,000 people. Bro literally grew up somewhere so small it's got a nature preserve as its main claim to fame. He don't know his biological parents. He was adopted when he was just 2 weeks old. Then at 14 years old, his adoptive parents kicked him out. No cap. A 14-year-old out in the streets of South Florida. He moved in with his friend Rick from the Creek's family. That same Rick you might have heard on his tape. And Rugrat started rapping because he thought he could do it better than a classmate who was rapping in front of him. Classic origin story, fam. He wasn't trying to be famous. He was just being him. The class clown, the wild kid, the one everybody underestimated. For years, he was grinding in total obscurity, working at Walmart, working at Tijuana Flats, couldn't keep a job more than 4 months at a time, recording in his boy's room on a Turtle Beach video game headset and a computer, listening to Chief Keef, Kodak Black, YNW Melly, XXXTentacion, all the Florida legends and drill influences that shaped his sound. He was dropping freestyles on SoundCloud for years and barely getting plays. Then in September 2024, he dropped One Take Freestyle, and it went stupid. Within weeks, it was the #1 song on Spotify's US viral chart. Suddenly, labels were calling. He signed with Remain Solid and 300 Entertainment, and just like that, the man went from a porch in Limestone Creek to the 50th floor. Real rags to riches. That's literally what he named his debut tape, Porch to the Pen. Dropped February 28, 2025, and the cosigns came flooding in. Kodak Black, Lil Yachty, Lil Uzi Vert posted him. Bossman Delo took him on tour. He performed at Rolling Loud Miami and Rolling Loud California. The New York Times called his style fully formed. The Fader named him an artist to watch. And then, the one that really sent him into another stratosphere, Drake himself reposted him. Right after Kendrick swept the Grammys with Not Like Us in February 2025, Drake was in Australia on tour. He posted an Instagram reel, himself on stage, wearing a hoodie with fake bullet holes in it, smoke effects pouring out, and in the background, a bass-boosted remix of 1900Rugrat's One Take Freestyle. Rugrat said he literally shook his girl awake when he saw it. "Babe, Drake posted me." That was the biggest cosign of his life. He told Complex it blew his mind. He told the Fader he was freaking out. To a 21-year-old kid from a town of 1,000 people, Drake shouting you out to his tens of millions of followers is everything. So imagine what it felt like when he listened to Drake's new album and felt like that same man had just reached into his bag and took from him without asking. Here's where it gets crazy. Before all of this, before the Drake co-sign, before the Grammys moment, before the viral posts, Drake's camp had already been in contact with 1900Rugrat, and that contact wasn't just about complimenting his music, it was about acquiring it. According to Rugrat's own words in his Instagram video, around a year and a half before Iceman dropped, one of Drake's producers reached out wanting to hear unreleased music. Now think about what that means. This wasn't a fan DM, this wasn't some A&R on a fishing expedition. Drake's producer directly hit up a then-unknown Florida rapper asking for music. Rugrat sent them 10 songs, 10 unreleased records, all of them set aside for his own album. And he said in the video, "Keep this part in your memory because it's crucial." He sent them specifically knowing how people in this industry move. He wasn't naive, he was watching his back. "I didn't want nobody to steal my shit, and I know how people move." And what happened?
So I sent 10 songs through, and they was all finna be on my album because I didn't want nobody to steal my shit because I know how people move.
Drake's team listened to all 10 tracks, and the one they wanted, the one they zeroed in on, was the intro, the same beat that would go on to open Porch to the Pen. Rugrat's own words again, the one they took a liking to was the intro. He said no, flat out. "I said, no, you can't have this song."
The one they took a liking to was the intro. Now the intro still dropped. I said, no, you can't have this song.
He held on to it. He put it on his own debut tape. He released it on February 28th, 2025 as the opening track of Porch to the Pen. That beat, the only beat he's ever produced himself and sat there and made from scratch, became the intro to his first real project. Then May 15th, 2026 arrives. Drake drops not one album, not two, but 3 albums simultaneously. Iceman, Habibti, Maid of Honor, 43 songs total, all dropped at midnight during the 4th installment of his Iceman livestream series. He pulls out 3 hard drives on camera. The internet loses its mind. It's the biggest rollout Drake had done in years. His first solo studio album since 2023's For All the Dogs. His first real statement album since Kendrick Lamar buried him with Not Like Us. Everyone goes to listen, and 1900Rugrat goes to listen too. He gets to track 15 on Iceman, a song called Little Birdie. And according to Rugrat, something hits him immediately. He goes back, he listens to the intro of Porch to the Pen. He listens to Little Birdie again, and he posts the video. "Twin, that's the only beat I ever produced and sat there and made myself. Don't rip my shit and repitch it like that."
Till I just went and listened to Iceman, and I listened to Little Birdie, and then I went back and listened to the intro of my first album. Twin, that's the only beat I've ever produced and sat there and produced. Don't rip my shit and repitch it like that, fam.
Let me say that again for the people in the back. This man said that's the only beat he ever produced himself. Not a beat someone else made, not a loop he grabbed off the internet. That was his creation, from scratch. And he's saying Drake took it, pitched it differently, and put it on Iceman, an album that's being credited as Drake's comeback moment, as if it belonged to him. And check this. The song Little Birdie is listed as written and composed solely by Drake. No Rugrat credit, no co-production credit, nothing. The second that video dropped, the street started talking, and I mean immediately. Music forums lit up. Reddit threads got created within hours. Comments on Iceman reviews started filling up with one specific sentence. Little Birdie was written by 1900Rugrat and used without his permission. Fan accounts started clipping the 2 songs side by side. YouTube breakdowns started popping up. The TikTok timeline exploded. And here's where it gets even deeper, because this wasn't just a random accusation from a no-name artist trying to clout chase off a big album drop. This was a man with receipts, a man who could point to the documented communication between himself and Drake's production team, a man who put his own song out months before Iceman and could literally play them back to back. The timeline is airtight, fam. He made the beat. Drake's camp reached out and wanted it. He said no. His track came out on February 28, 2025. Drake's alleged version shows up on Iceman on May 15, 2026. That's the sequence, that's the chronology, that's how the dots connect. Now here's where people started connecting even more dots, because this wasn't the first time Drake had been in this exact position. And this is where the story goes from a one-on-one dispute to a full-on pattern that the culture has been watching play out for years. Y'all gotta understand, 1900Rugrat is a Florida rapper who grew up watching XXXTentacion blow up in his state. He told Billboard he was a freshman in high school when Murder on My Mind was just a SoundCloud song. He watched what happened when X got big, and X had his own very specific situation with Drake. Let me break down that XXXTentacion situation because it is directly relevant to what's happening right now. It's January 2017. Drake is on his Boy Meets World tour in Amsterdam. He premieres a new track from his upcoming More Life project called KMT, featuring UK rapper Giggs. The track gets leaked online through a fan recording at the show, and almost immediately, within hours, XXXTentacion and his fan base start making noise. Why? Because Look at Me had just become one of the biggest SoundCloud songs in the world. X was in jail at the time, sitting in Broward County, which is literally 1900Rugrat's region, by the way, the same South Florida universe. And the flow that Drake was spitting on this new KMT record sounded eerily, unmistakably, uncomfortably similar to the exact cadence and pattern that X had pioneered on Look at Me. X's team went public immediately. His manager at the time, Adam22, admitted he had entertained both possibilities. Maybe Drake heard it, maybe he didn't. But the similarities were hard to ignore. His associate Danny Towers went on record and said, "And keep it real, I felt it was kind of ridiculous to say that you've never heard of him." X himself spoke to XXL directly from jail and said something that now sounds almost prophetic given what's happening with Rugrat. If Drake is gonna take the flow, at least reach out to Ania, help Ania out in this situation. Sound familiar? Because 1900Rugrat's complaint is almost the same energy. You got the access to hit me up. You hit me up. You asked for the music. I said no. And you still went ahead and did it anyway. And the difference between X and Rugrat situations is actually more damning for Drake in the Rugrat case, no cap. With X, the argument was about flow and cadence, things that are harder to legally pin down, even if they're morally clear. With Rugrat, we're allegedly talking about the actual beat, an instrumental, a production, the kind of thing that has a clearer legal and ethical line around it. And Drake's response to X back then? He denied everything publicly, said on BBC Radio 1 Extra that he didn't know what anybody was talking about, played it off, and that was that. Because X was in jail young and didn't have the institutional support to push it further. The beef became part of the narrative around X. It boosted X's profile, his associates later admitted, but Drake never got properly held accountable. Are we watching the same playbook again? Now gang, let's talk about the full picture, because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. In June 2015, Meek Mill posted a series of tweets that changed the hip-hop discourse for years. He accused Drake of not writing his own raps. That sparked the biggest ghostwriting controversy hip-hop had seen in a generation. Reference tracks surfaced, audio recordings of an Atlanta rapper named Quentin Miller performing the exact same verses that ended up on Drake's songs. Near-identical delivery, near-identical cadences, song after song, and the reference tracks from 10 Bands, Know Yourself, and other key Drake records had Miller's voice on them doing the verses in almost exactly the way Drake would perform them. Now Drake's camp called Miller a collaborator, not a ghostwriter. But the distinction was paper thin when you listen to those recordings. The deeper layer that people often miss is what NPR pointed out at the time. The most important part of rap isn't just the words on paper, it's the cadence, the flow, the melody, how a bar sounds. And if someone else is laying that out in a reference track, essentially performing what the final product is going to sound like, then what exactly is left for the credited artist to do? That's the uncomfortable question Drake has never fully answered. And it didn't stop there. The Weeknd, back when he was broke and hungry, admitted to Rolling Stone in 2015 that he gave songs to Drake for Take Care that were originally intended for his own House of Balloons mixtape. He said it himself. "I gave up almost half my album." He was grateful because Drake put a spotlight on him, but the quote he dropped years later, when him and Drake were on bad terms, told the real story. "I thank God that I never signed my life away." That's the OVO trap people don't talk about enough. Early in their careers, artists around Drake give up music, give up songs, give up sounds, sometimes out of gratitude, sometimes out of pressure, sometimes just because Drake has the reach and they're trying to eat. And those songs go on Drake records with minimal credit and zero conversation. Then there's Future's reference tracks that leaked during the 2024 beef era, and Vori and Lil Yachty. Rick Ross literally trolled Drake during the beef by posting a video captioned Yachty aka The Pen. The implication? Yachty was writing for Drake. The reference track started surfacing, showing Yachty's voice on verses that would go on to become Drake records. The cadence, the delivery, the whole blueprint, allegedly coming from Yachty. So when 1900Rugrat steps to the camera and says Drake took his beat without permission after already being told no, that doesn't exist in a vacuum. It lands on top of a mountain of prior situations that the culture has been cataloging for over a decade. And that's why this hits different. This ain't a one-off. This is a chapter in a very long book. Here's what makes the timing of all this so devastating for Drake's narrative. Iceman was supposed to be the comeback. After Kendrick Lamar bodied him with Not Like Us in May 2024, a song that went on to win Record of the Year and Song of the Year at the 2026 Grammys, the first diss track in history to win a Grammy, and was performed live to 133.5 million viewers at the Super Bowl halftime show, Drake was in a position he'd never been in before. His lawsuit against UMG got dismissed in October 2025. The judge ruled the lyrics were non-actionable opinion, so legally, Kendrick walked. Culturally, Kendrick walked. The whole world had seen it. Drake had to respond. And he did it the only way he knows how. Big, loud, and overwhelming. 3 albums simultaneously. 43 songs. Music videos premiering during a live stream. An ice sculpture that created safety concerns in Toronto. Months of teasers. The Iceman rollout was supposed to be a coronation. His reclamation. His statement that regardless of what happened in 2024, he was still here. Still standing. Still the biggest. And within hours of the release, one of the first major stories circulating wasn't about the diss tracks aimed at Kendrick or LeBron James or DJ Khaled. It was about 1900Rugrat standing up on Instagram and saying, "You stole my intro, and I told you you couldn't have it." That's a PR disaster on what should have been Drake's biggest day of the year, at minimum. And think about how it looks from 1900Rugrat's perspective. This man co-signed you. You posted him. You put his music behind the most symbolic moment of your post-beef tour. You, in your bullet hole hoodie, defiant and resilient, with Rugrat's voice echoing through the arena. You used his music to represent your strength, and then allegedly you went and took his music without compensation, without credit, and without permission. That's not just a business dispute. That's a violation of trust from the person who showed you the most love at your lowest point. Now here's what everyone's waiting to find out. At the time this script is being recorded, Drake has not publicly addressed 1900Rugrat's claims. No Instagram story, no tweet, no subliminal, nothing. And that silence is doing a lot of talking. Because Drake's options here are limited. He can deny it. But the timeline of events, the documented outreach from his production team, and the audio similarities between the two records make denial a dangerous play. He can credit Rugrat retroactively, but that's an admission that the credit wasn't there when it should have been. He can settle it quietly behind the scenes, which is the most likely outcome if lawyers are already talking. And Rugrat might be legally prevented from ever addressing it publicly again. Or he can ignore it entirely, which is arguably what he did with XXXTentacion in 2017, and wait for the news cycle to move on. But the internet in 2026 is different from 2017. Documentation lives forever. Side-by-side comparisons get clipped and saved. Every single person who remembers Drake posting Rugrat's music is going to hold this up as evidence of a pattern. The street's been talking about this from the moment Iceman dropped, and the longer Drake stays silent, the louder that conversation gets. What we do know is this: 1900Rugrat ain't backing down. He didn't frame this as a question. He didn't say, "I think this sounds similar." He said point blank, "That's the only beat I ever produced and sat there and made myself. Don't rip my shit and repitch it like that." That's a declaration. That's a man who knows what his creation sounds like and isn't entertaining any gray area. And 1900Rugrat's got something that a lot of people who've accused Drake of this type of thing in the past didn't have. A fan base that's growing fast and loud, a label behind him, and the kind of authenticity-first reputation in the Florida rap scene that makes people believe him automatically. He's not some unknown trying to get clout. He's a 21-year-old artist who built his whole brand on being real, being him, and being unfiltered. Crying Wolf would go against everything he stands for. Let me zoom out for a second, because this situation is bigger than Drake and bigger than 1900Rugrat. What we're watching is a conversation about power in the music industry that hip-hop has been having for decades but still hasn't fully resolved. When you're the biggest artist in the game, you have gravitational pull. Smaller artists get drawn into your orbit. They send you music, they share unreleased records. They're grateful for the exposure, the cosign, the repost. And in the process of being grateful, they sometimes lose their creations to the machine. That's not new. But what is evolving is the ability to document it, expose it, and hold people accountable in real time. XXXTentacion didn't have the platform, the backing, or the legal resources to really pursue Drake in 2017. He was literally in jail. The comparison still resonated with fans, boosted his profile, and became a part of his legend. But justice? That's a different conversation. 1900Rugrat is in a different position. He's signed to a real label. He's got a documented paper trail of communication with Drake's camp. He's got a fan base that's awake and paying attention. He's got the original beat he made himself, and he has the self-awareness to know that his silence would be interpreted as acceptance. The real tea is this. Drake's brand has always been built partly on authenticity, the confessional bars, the personal storytelling, the idea that this is a man who lives his music, who writes from his soul, who creates from a real place. Every single allegation of ghostwriting or biting or stealing, from Meek Mill in 2015 all the way to 1900Rugrat in 2026, chips away at that foundation one piece at a time. Not enough to bring the whole thing down, but enough to change the way the culture reads him. And now, on the album he specifically made to restore his reputation, one of the most discussed tracks out of 43 is being claimed by a 21-year-old kid from Limestone Creek, Florida, who never even wanted to be in this situation. He just wanted his intro back. Real recognize real, gang. And the streets recognize that what 1900Rugrat described in that Instagram video, the direct communication, the specific song being requested, the specific refusal, the alleged use of it anyway, is not the behavior of someone who respects the culture. It's the behavior of someone who operates from a position of power and expects that power to make problems disappear. But here's where it gets crazy. Drake is in the most vulnerable position he's been in since before his first album. He's trying to win back a culture that just watched Kendrick Lamar perform Not Like Us at the Super Bowl. He's trying to prove he can create without controversy, without legal battles, without the narrative of artificiality that has followed him since Meek first opened that box in 2015. And instead of walking out of the Iceman rollout clean, he's walking out of it with a 21-year-old Florida rapper on Instagram pointing directly at his album and saying, "Don't rip my shit." How Drake responds to this, whether he responds at all, is going to tell us a lot about where he's at right now as an artist and as a man. Because the difference between a legend and a liability is how you handle the moment when someone calls you out on your timing. And right now, the timing couldn't be worse for Drizzy. Drop a comment below. Do y'all think Drake stole Rugrat's beat, or is this a coincidence? Have you listened to both songs back to back? Because once you do, that's where you make up your own mind, eh? And if you think Drake's been doing this since the beginning, since at least the XXXTentacion era, smash that like button because the culture needs to keep documenting this pattern. I'm out. Stay dangerous.